Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Best of the Best Businesses in Central Massachusetts. I'm your host, Siobhan Weber with Castanetti Realty Group. Joining me today is Nathalie Oliveri with MBA Mortgage, and we're here to talk about residential lending. So thank you so much for joining me today, Nathalie.
Thank you for having me, Siobhan.
Appreciate you taking the time.
Always.
First things first, we kind of like to ask people in these interviews, what made you get into this business? Is this always what you've done?
No, I'm actually newer in the business. I've been doing it about 4 years. I was in corporate America before. I was a buyer at States when you were there.
Former colleague,
Former colleague. I worked in loyalty solutions, and I worked for a manufacturer. And my clients were Apple, Best Buy, Costco. All the big names that you're familiar with out there.
Absolutely. So, what made you make the move into mortgages?
I did a lot of traveling before with my kids. And when I left my last position, I had been laid off because I was remote.
Oh, yeah.
Funny, right?
Yeah, that's kind of back a couple years ago when that mattered.
Yeah. And so, I didn't want to relocate to California. So I decided to do something different. And I sat there and thought, what do I want to be when I grow up? Someone that I knew owned a mortgage company. And he thought I'd be a really great, asset. So he convinced me to go and get my mortgage license. I worked with him for just a couple of months, and then I realized I needed more training. I needed more.
Yep.
And MBA Mortgage offered that for me. So I started working with MBA Mortgage not that long after I was licensed.
All right. So almost 4 years then with that company.
Yeah.
And 4 years approximately in the lending industry total.
Yeah.
All right, great. What's been your biggest challenge so far or maybe it was initially when you were getting set up, but
I think there were a number of challenges. We're in this market of crazy ups and downs, the roller coaster of financing and home buying. At first, it was really knowing, what I needed to know,
right.
and being able to connect with people, because at that point it was COVID.
Right.
And no one was seeing anyone. No one was talking to anyone. People
Right.
were just kind of in their own little silos. And then once I started getting into it, I think the largest challenge just in the last year has been the rates.
Very true. Very true.
But you have to remember, people need housing. They need housing for different things.
Yep.
One, maybe they're, relocating. Or maybe their family's growing, or maybe, they're downsizing, whatever the case may be, there's still a need. Rates are kind of, not really the priority, right? They're not really something that should affect your home buying, because there are people that need to buy homes.
Right.
They can always refinance.
Very true.
It's really more important to find what you need from a home. And then you can always go ahead and make those adjustments. How many times have you refinanced, in your life?
Yeah, several, right?
Yeah.
And most people I know the same thing. I mean, the average life of a mortgage is what?
Like 3-4 years.
Yeah.
I've refinanced, probably 5 separate times, with different properties that I've owned. So, understanding that, whatever the rate is and whatever the term is, it's going to change.
Right. It is a temporary, the home is, if not forever, longer term, certainly, than the rate has to be.
Right.
So, and I mean, the fact is too, and we see this all the time, when we're helping folks to buy the homes and sell the homes, at 8%, the prices started to stabilize a little bit.
Yes, they did.
So, yes, you were paying more in interest and arguably your purchasing power had gone down, but it wasn't costing you as much to buy the home. When rates were at 2.5%, 3%, it was like free money. I mean, people were offering enormous numbers. And so many were priced out, not because of the rate, but because the low rate created a huge overage, in list to sale price. So,
and keep in mind too, that those overages, a lot of times people were asking for gaps. Do you have gap money? That meant that your home may not have appraised as high as you offered. You had to cover that difference.
That's right.
So you essentially paid more than what, the appraisers thought your home was worth, just so that you could get into a home.
Very true.
Those individuals probably still don't have the equity in the home that they're in.
Right. Even with the rate of acceleration, they are going to need to be in those homes for a good long time. And listen, I've had some buyers in this situation where the house is right next door to my parents.
Yeah.
I will pay any amount,
Yeah.
right?
And
you know
that's
what?
fine.
That's fine. That makes sense if you can do it and it's what makes sense for you. But we do then have to have those conversations about time horizon. How long are you planning to be in this home? Because if this is a short-term initiative for you, you run the real risk of not making your money back.
Absolutely.
So that's the danger right there. Yeah.
And there were a lot of people too that were looking at adjustable rate mortgages. And, that can potentially be a good thing, but may not be. If you're planning on staying in a home for a long period of time, when that rate, goes away, what happens? If the rate is double, then you're stuck with that double. You have to refinance no matter what.
Right.
So, understanding kind of where you are and the options that you have is so important. And that's one thing that I like to do is I'm a big communicator. And I hold people's hand. I can vouch for that. Yeah. I can hold people's hands. And I really, one of the things I found, so as a new home purchaser, 6 years ago, I purchased a second home. And it had been a long time since I had purchased my original home. And I ended up dealing with a mortgage broker who was recommended by the realtor that we were working with, because at that point I didn't know anyone. And she was horrible.
That can really damage your experience.
It really can. And so I used that experience to really be a better mortgage professional because there were so many things I didn't know. I was traveling. I told her, I need to know exactly what it is that you need from me because I'm back in a plane, in 5 days, and I need to know what you need so I can prepare for that. She badgered me, didn't give me everything that I needed, threatened that I was going to risk not closing on time, and so
the fear of not closing is a really unfair advantage that, some can try to hold over you, but it sounds like that's an example of what not to do.
Exactly.
So you're doing it the right way with people.
You want to feel comfortable with who you're working with. You want to know that individual is going to hold your hand, talk you through it, and really explain it if that's what you need or want.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely. For sure. I think that, sometimes folks don't know the right questions to ask. And so I always recommend, especially if you're early in the process, but really at any time, it's never too soon to chat with a mortgage lender and say, this is my situation, because like every home, every financial profile is just a little bit different. Even if it's mostly the same, it's just a little bit different. So knowing what applies to you specifically really gives you that education.
No two loans are the same.
Yeah.
And some people may say, oh, well, my friend, they got this, or, oh, my brother, he was able to get that. No two scenarios are the same. So you need to know what's going to work for you. And, being a broker, I call myself the matchmaker of financing.
I like that.
That way, I can find what is going to be the best option for you.
Right.
Or for the person that's buying.
Right.
Because again, you want to make sure this is going to be your largest purchase likely, right? In your lifetime. And so you want to know that you're going to be okay. And you want to know all the different aspects that you need to.
Absolutely. And that, lending is a critical part of the home transaction process. And I talk to my clients about their team of professionals, right? You've got me, I'm going to hold your hand the whole way. You've got your lender, it's going to hold your hand the whole way. The good ones, right?
Yes.
And we're going to matchmake you to the right financial product. With your, obviously, input, we're going to matchmake you to the right house. And then if not more importantly, we're going to help you get from that house identification to where you're moving into it with the least amount of pain and extra money and all of that as possible.
Right.
Because if you don't do it all the time, this can be very confusing. I mean, I purchased homes before I was in real estate, and it's night and day what you even think to ask, right?
Well, it's funny you say that, Siobhan, because there's a lot of people that will say to me, oh, I talked to my parents.
Right.
Or I talked to a friend. Well, the first question I ask is, when was the last time that they made a purchase? Because things have changed within lending. Rules, regulations change all the time.
Very much.
So what happened, for your friend, your brother, your parent, may be different today.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always important to stay up to date with any new changes that have occurred.
Absolutely. And your professionals are the ones to help you do that. Please don't self-diagnose on Google, right? Do not go on Zillow. It's the WebMD equivalent. Your doctor hates it. We hate it. Like it's, trust the professionals.
I think another note too, just to interject for a minute, a lot of people don't understand the difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval. And so a lot of people will go online
Yes, right.
and go to certain websites and say, oh, I'm ready. Here's my, my pre-approval. And it's not.
Yeah.
If someone's going to be asking you for documentation, a true pre-qualification or pre-approval, I should say, they're going to look at your bank statements.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to look at your W-2s. They're going to ask you questions. They may even contact your employer. Likely they will.
Right.
So, it's important that you give them the time to do the process right.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a 15-minute process.
Right. And by the way, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that because those sort of churn and burn lending shops, right, are not received well. If you're trying to be competitive as a buyer in this market, and I'm on the listing side representing the seller, and I have 7 offers or 20 offers, right? And I see some lenders who I know are issuing pre-qualifications, which is essentially you're trusting what the buyer has told you, right? It's a questionnaire. Mm-hmm. They say, well, if everything you told us is true, then you would qualify for that. But again, as Nathalie said, there's no verification of the information they've provided or, validation. And so as a listing agent, I get that. And I say, well, listen, that's great that this online website said you can get up to 600,000. But I don't have a high degree of confidence that it will go through, or that if it does, I mean, frankly, working with local lenders and local professionals, they don't have to be in the same network, right? If I'm your realtor, I don't have to be the one to pick your lender. That's not how it works.
No, not at all.
We don't want to give that impression. Having said that, though, when I do make lender recommendations, I'll say, oh, and I see Nathalie, right? I see her every week at our networking meeting, or I talk to her every whatever, or I have her cell phone. Because when push comes to shove, I mean, real estate is really about timing and relationships. And if you can't reach the lender because they're in Ohio, work in a call center, you can't get the information you need. And that is what puts deals at risk, not, doing the homework up front. So if it's not going to work, it won't work. So better to know that up front and save everybody the time and heartache than to get 80% through the process and be denied financing because the homework wasn't really done the right way up front.
Correct. A lot of times you really need to know what rate were they quoting you on, what were the taxes that they were using, because that can make a big difference in the monthly payments.
Absolutely. And actually to that point too, when we're representing the sellers on the listing side, a buyer who submits an offer with a 90-day-old pre-approval in this market, it may as well be expired, right? Because it almost is anyway. But also, if it's not within the last 30 days, who knows what your scenario was? I mean, things are changing so quickly. So, and again, you get that turnaround more easily with local folks, whoever local is to you, if you've got a family member, whatever the case is. But finding someone you're comfortable with, as you mentioned, who feels like they're going to consult with you, but not boss you. It's a balance.
Absolutely. Know the questions that you need to ask, or even just let them lead you. When I sit down for my initial steps, I ask a lot of questions. I start with saying, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. Just know I'm trying to understand who you are, where your mindset is, what you're looking at, so that I know which direction to go.
Right, exactly. Because if you think of us as, encyclopedias of information, you don't want to start on page 1 and have us read you all the way to page 1000, right? Let's just cut to what's most relevant for you. And that's one of the services we provide. So,
and I think one of the things too is you may think you're ready to buy, but maybe you're not. And so working with a mortgage professional who maybe will help direct you, I know I do for some of my clients, you're not ready yet, but here are the steps that you need to take in order to be ready. And I expect it'll take you 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. But understanding, having someone that's going to walk you through it
Right.
and then actually give you some direction is going to be important as well.
I think a lot of times people think it's too early to have that conversation. Truly, it's never too early. Or, you know,
Never.
sometimes they've decided, oh, I know I'm not ready. Well, that's okay. That's okay, actually, because you can get familiarized with the market and what
Right.
it's doing. You know, I always liken it to a game of double dutch, right? If you're on the
Yeah.
sidelines, you're sort of like, I don't know, and when do I go in, right? You just got to start jumping,
Yeah.
and then it'll flow, and you'll get the
Yeah.
rhythm of it. And like you said, if you need a series of steps, what better way to get that information than from a professional who
Right.
knows the criteria to qualify you?
Right.
Better not to guess, and then, you know, maybe put yourself farther from your targets. So
Yeah. And I think lastly too, you had mentioned too, you know, making sure that the individual is available when you are. You know, if the person you're working with is working 7 to 3 or 9 to 5, they're not there in the evenings, they're not working on the weekends. I've had people lose deals because the individual that they were working with, you know, wasn't available when they called. I had someone reach out to me back in November, and they tried calling their mortgage professional 8 times before they submitted an offer. And when they submitted the offer, the mortgage professional said, "Oh no, you don't qualify for that." And they lost the house. It's not someone I was working with, but it was a realtor that I know. And she said, I tried to explain it. So,
right.
you know, there's so many different reasons why you want to make sure you're comfortable, but that they're available for when you're going to be out shopping, which is usually on the weekends and in the evenings.
Truly, even in this remote world, I mean, you have
Right.
meetings and things and commitments, so it ends up still mostly being nice and weekends for sure.
Right.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you,
It's been a
Siobhan.
pleasure chatting with you. We're going to put Natalie's information on the screen here and in the post that goes along with this video, so be sure to reach out and ask all of your lending questions. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Have a great day.